The fluorescent lights in that courtroom hummed in a way I'd never noticed before. Maybe because I'd never sat still long enough to hear them. Or maybe because everything else, my uncle's lawyer shuffling papers, my aunt dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she didn't need, the low murmur of people behind me had faded into something distant, like I was watching it all happen to someone else. My uncle caught my eye from across the aisle and smiled. That particular smile, the one he used to give me when I was 9 years old and said something he thought was naive, patronizing, practiced. Like he'd been rehearsing for this moment long before my grandmother ever got sick. I looked away. I thought about Grandma Ruth's kitchen instead. The way the morning light used to come through the yellow curtains she'd sewn herself and land in a stripe across the linoleum floor. How she always burned the first pancake on purpose and said it was for the pan. How she smelled like lavender and dish soap and something warm I've never been able to name but still sometimes think I catch in other people's houses, just for a second before it disappears. She'd been gone 4 months, and here I was in a building she would have hated, fighting for the house she built her entire life in. My mother left when I was 6. That's the simple version. The longer version involves a man she met at her co-worker's birthday party, a decision made in about 3 weeks, and a moving truck that came on a Thursday while I was at school. I came home to find my grandmother standing in the doorway of what used to be my mother's room, holding a note. She didn't read it to me. She folded it, put it in her cardigan pocket and said, "How about we make something with the leftover chicken?" That was Grandma Ruth. She didn't explain pain. She fed you through it. My uncle, my mother's older brother, lived 40 minutes away in a nice house with a finished basement and a boat he used maybe twice a year. He came to Christmas and Thanksgiving and called on birthdays. He was pleasant. Fine. The kind of person you describe as fine, because there's nothing specifically wrong with them, but also nothing that makes you feel anything either way. Grandma Ruth never complained about him. She was not a woman who complained. But once, when I was maybe 15 and we were watching a movie together, she said quietly, almost to herself, "Some people know how to be present and some people never learn." She didn't look at me when she said it. She was looking at the TV. I didn't ask who she meant. I lived with her from the time I was 6 until I was 18. I came back at 22 when she had her first hip surgery and never really left after that. I worked remotely. I do content coordination for a healthcare nonprofit, nothing glamorous, so it made sense. I told myself it made sense, honestly. I just didn't want to leave her alone in that house. She was the person who taught me to drive and helped me fill out my college applications and sat outside the bathroom door the night I got food poisoning at 23 and talked to me through it like it was nothing. She was the person who knew which side of my face breaks out when I'm stressed, and that I can't sleep with socks on, and that I need about 20 minutes alone after any social event before I'm a person again. She knew me, really knew me, the way very few people in your life ever actually do. When she was diagnosed with congestive heart failure 2 years ago, I moved my desk into the sunroom. I scheduled her appointments and picked up her prescriptions and learned to make her mother's apple cake from the handwritten index card she kept in the junk drawer. When hospice started coming in the spring, I was the one who met them at the door. I was the one who held her hand at 4 a.m. when the nights got hard. My uncle visited twice during those last 8 months. Twice. Both times he stayed less than 2 hours and both times he left saying he'd be back soon. He wasn't back soon. Grandma Ruth's estate was not complicated. She was not wealthy by any stretch. She had the house, a 3-bedroom craftsman in a quiet part of Asheville, North Carolina, paid off years ago, a modest savings account, and a small collection of antiques and jewelry that had been in the family for generations. The house, her attorney later told me, had appreciated considerably. The neighborhood had changed. What she'd bought for $38,000 in 1987 was now appraised at just under $500,000. Her will was clear. She had updated it 14 months before she died, with a different attorney than the one who had drawn up the original. She left the house and the majority of her savings to me. She left her jewelry to be divided among her grandchildren and a small sum to her church's food pantry. My uncle received nothing. I found out about the will 2 days after the funeral in the office of an attorney named Mr. Chiradle Hartley, who had a photo of a golden retriever on his desk and offered me water 3 times. I sat there in the same black dress I'd worn to bury her and heard the words and felt, I don't know what I felt. Numb, mostly. Grateful in a way that made me feel guilty for feeling grateful, like she'd reached across whatever was on the other side and pressed something into my hands. My uncle didn't take it quietly. Within 6 weeks, I had a letter from his attorney. The claim was that my grandmother had lacked the capacity to update her will due to her medical condition, that she had been, in their words, unduly influenced by me, a person in a caretaking position with unique access. They were challenging the validity of the updated will and seeking to reinstate the original, which had divided her estate more evenly. I read that letter 4 times. I remember my hands were very steady. I kept waiting to start shaking, but I didn't. I just felt something go cold and quiet inside me, something that said, okay then. I called my own attorney the next morning. Her name was Ms. Okafor. She had an office downtown with plants on every surface, big trailing pothos, rubber trees in terracotta pots, a small succulent arrangement on the windowsill. And she spoke in this calm, measured way that made you feel like things were going to be handled whether you kept it together or not. I liked her immediately. She explained the landscape plainly. Undue influence claims in will contests are common, she said. They are also, in most circumstances, difficult to prove. The burden is on the challenger. The fact that my grandmother had changed her will with a separate, independent attorney, not someone I had any connection to, was significant. The fact that she had done so 14 months before her death, before her condition had deteriorated seriously, was also significant. What we want to establish, Ms. Okafor said, is that your grandmother's decision was informed, intentional, and entirely her own. I told her I could do that. Tell me about her, she said. So I did. I told her about the yellow curtains and the first pancake and the index card in the junk drawer. I told her about the morning after my college graduation when we sat on the back porch, and she told me that the only thing she'd ever wanted from me was that I become someone I could respect. I told her about the way she fought for every single thing she believed in, quietly and without drama, in that particular way she had of making her position completely clear without raising her voice once. She was sharp, I said. She was sharp right up until the end. Anyone who says otherwise didn't know her. Miss Okafor wrote something in her notepad. Did she ever say anything to you about why she updated her will? She asked. She told me directly, I said. About a year before she died. We were going over some paperwork and she just said it. She said she'd been thinking about what was fair, not what was equal. She said those were 2 different things. She said she hoped I understood. Did you ask her to update the will? No, I said. I didn't know she had until Mr. Hartley told me. Ms. Okafor nodded. Good, she said. The months between that first meeting and the court date were strange. I was still living in the house, the estate couldn't be fully transferred while it was contested, and so I woke up every morning in the same room I'd slept in since I was 6, made coffee in the same kitchen. Sat in the sunroom with my laptop where Grandma Ruth's hospital bed had been just a few months earlier. The house still felt full of her. The yellow curtains were still there. Her reading glasses were still on the side table next to the couch because I hadn't been able to move them yet. My uncle didn't call. I didn't expect him to. What I didn't expect was his daughter, my cousin Bethany, who I hadn't spoken to in years, to reach out through Instagram. Her message said that she wanted me to know this wasn't her idea and she was sorry. I read it 3 times and then didn't respond because I didn't know what to say, and Miss Okafor had told me to be careful about communications with anyone connected to the other side. I thought about my mother during those months more than I had in years. She and I had a loose occasional relationship, a phone call every few months, a card at Christmas. She'd come to the funeral briefly and hugged me in that careful way she hugged me, like she wasn't sure of the pressure. I didn't tell her about the will contest until it was already in motion. she said. "Oh, Mara," in a way that carried a lot of things she didn't say out loud. I kept working. I kept doing the food pantry runs that Grandma Ruth had done every other Saturday because it felt wrong to stop. I kept making the apple cake badly and throwing most of it away. I kept waking up in the middle of the night thinking I heard her moving around downstairs, the soft, specific sound of her slippers on the kitchen floor, before I remembered. There was one morning, about a month before the hearing, when I found something I hadn't found before. I was going through the bookshelf in her bedroom, not looking for anything specific, just finally making myself sort through things, and tucked behind a row of paperback mysteries was a spiral notebook. The cover was navy blue. I almost set it aside without opening it. I sat down on the edge of her bed and opened it. It was a record. That's the only word for it. 3 years of entries, not a diary exactly, not emotional. Grandma Ruth was not effusive on paper, but a detailed, specific account, dates, events, things she'd noticed. When my uncle had called, when he hadn't. When I had driven her to her cardiologist in Raleigh and we stopped for barbecue on the way back because she said she deserved it. When she had sat at the kitchen table and written a list of everything she owned and thought, as she phrased it, carefully about what is right. There was an entry from the week she'd made her appointment with Mr. Hartley, the attorney who drafted the updated will. She had written, in her small, careful handwriting, "Made the call today. I know what I want. I have known for some time. This is not about anger. This is about truth." I sat there for a long time with that notebook in my hands. When I called Miss Okafor, she was very quiet for a moment after I described it. Then she said, "Don't move it. I'm coming over tomorrow morning." My uncle looked older in the courtroom than I remembered. Or maybe I just hadn't looked at him closely in years. He was sitting beside his attorney, a man in a grey suit who kept straightening papers that were already straight. My uncle had his hands folded on the table and was looking at the front of the room with an expression of calm I recognized. It was performed calm. I'd seen it before at family functions when something wasn't going his way. His wife was in the gallery behind him. She did not look at me. I sat beside Ms. Okafor and watched the judge come in. Her name was Judge Carver. She was maybe 60, with Silver Street hair pulled back firmly and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She settled in with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 30 years and had very little patience for wasted time. She looked at the room once, quickly, the way you scan a space when you already know what's in it. When she looked at me, something shifted slightly in her expression. It was subtle. I almost missed it. A small pause. A fractional change in her face. Then she looked down at the materials in front of her, and the hearing began. My uncle's attorney made his argument. Testamentary capacity. Undue influence. A vulnerable elderly woman dependent on a live-in caretaker with financial interest in the outcome. He used words like isolation and manipulation, and I sat very still and breathed through my nose and did not look at my uncle. Miss Okafor was methodical. She walked through the timeline. She submitted the statement from Mr. Ricardo, Hartley attesting to my grandmother's clarity and volition at the time the will was drafted. She submitted medical records showing that 14 months prior to her death, my grandmother's cognitive function had been assessed as normal by her cardiologist. She submitted phone records, gently, matter-of-factly, showing the pattern of contact between my uncle and my grandmother over the preceding 3 years. Then she submitted the notebook. My uncle's attorney objected. There was an exchange I didn't fully follow. Judge Carver looked at the notebook with her reading glasses on and turned several pages slowly and then looked up and said she would allow it. My uncle's attorney sat down. I was called to testify. I told the truth. I told about the 14 years I had lived in that house, the 2 years I had spent as her primary caregiver, the conversation she and I had about fairness versus equality. I said that I had not asked her to change her will, had not known she had done so, and had not known the contents of it until after her death. Did you benefit financially from your grandmother's care? the judge asked. I lived in her home, I said. She didn't charge me rent. I didn't take a salary. I paid my own expenses. Were you aware that you might be named in the will? She told me once that she had taken care of things. That was all she said. I didn't ask what she meant. Judge Carver studied me for a moment. No further questions, she said. My uncle was called next. He answered everything smoothly. He said he had been concerned about me for years, about the dynamic, about the dependency his mother had developed. He said he had wanted to be more present, but that his own family demands made it difficult. He said the will change was not characteristic of his mother, and that he believed she had been, in the final years of her life, not entirely herself. Judge Carver listened with her hands folded. Mr. Caldwell, she said when he finished, in the 3 years prior to your mother's passing, how many times did you visit her? A pause. Several times. I'd have to check specific. The phone records entered as evidence show 11 calls in 36 months, Judge Carver said, not unkindly, just precisely. And the attorney who drafted the updated will has submitted a statement attesting that your mother, at the time of that appointment, was alert, oriented, and spoke clearly and specifically about her wishes. She paused, including the reasons behind them. Another pause. I'd like to read something into the record, Judge Carver said. She had the notebook open in front of her. She read my grandmother's entry from the week she'd made her appointment. Made the call today. I know what I want. I have known for some time. This is not about anger. This is about truth. The room was quiet. Mrs. Whitfield wrote clearly and with evident intention. Judge Carver said, there is no evidence before this court of diminished capacity. There is no evidence of undue influence. What I see, in fact, is a woman who knew her own mind and made a deliberate, documented choice. She set down the notebook. I'm ruling in favor of the respondent. The updated will stands. I don't remember walking out of the building. I remember the sunlight hitting me in the face and sitting down on a bench near the parking lot, and Ms. Okafor sitting beside me and neither of us saying anything for a while. She did that for you, you know. Miss Okafor said eventually. The notebook. She knew. I'd been thinking the same thing. Grandma Ruth had not been a woman who did things accidentally. That notebook, tucked exactly where I would eventually find it, not immediately, not too soon, but when I was ready to go through her room, was not an accident. She had known, she had prepared. That was so entirely like her that I almost laughed. And then I started crying quietly with my hands in my lap, and Ms. Okafor passed me a packet of tissues from her bag without comment. My uncle drove past the parking lot while I was sitting there. I don't know if he saw me. He didn't stop. I have been living in the house for 8 months since the ruling. Not everything is easy. The legal fees took most of my savings. The house needs a new roof. Last month, I finally moved Grandma Ruth's reading glasses from the side table, not to throw them away, but into the small wooden box where I keep things I want to keep, and it took me about 4 days to work up to it. I talked to my mother on the phone last week. She asked how I was doing, really, and I told her honestly, better. Tired, but better. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something she'd never said before. She said she knew she hadn't been there, that she'd made choices she couldn't take back, that she was sorry I hadn't had more people on my side. I didn't say all the things I might have said. I just said, thank you. It seemed like the right-sized thing to say. Bethany, my cousin, texted me 2 months after the ruling. She said her dad wasn't speaking to her because she'd refused to testify against me. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes. We went last month and talked for 2 hours, and I think she might be someone I could actually know, with enough time. I still do the food pantry runs every other Saturday. I still make the apple cake, and I'm getting better at it, though it will never be exactly right. I sat in the backyard on a morning in October when the leaves were turning and drank my coffee and thought about what Grandma Ruth said to me once. years ago, about the difference between what is fair and what is equal. She was right. She was right about almost everything. The house still smells like lavender if you know where to stand. Right in the hallway near the closet where she kept her cardigans. I know where to stand. I always have. I'm not going anywhere. I've thought a lot about what my uncle actually lost. Not in the courtroom. He lost that in a single morning, clearly and finally, when Judge Carver set down Grandma Ruth's notebook and said the words that ended it. I mean, what he lost long before any of that. What he lost the first time he decided a 2-hour visit was enough. The 10th time he didn't call. The night she was scared and I was the one sitting beside her and he was 40 minutes away, living his life. People talk about consequences like they're something that arrive dramatically, all at once. Most of the time they don't. They accumulate. Quietly. In the margins of ordinary days, every choice you make is building something, and the question is just whether you're paying enough attention to see what it is. Grandma Ruth paid attention. That's what I keep coming back to. She wasn't a perfect person. She'd be the first to tell you, in that dry way she had, that she had made her share of mistakes over the years. But she paid attention. She looked at her life honestly, and she made decisions based on what was true, not what was comfortable or expected. That notebook wasn't just evidence. It was the record of a woman who had spent 3 years making sure that her truth would survive her. That takes a particular kind of character. Not bravery in the dramatic sense. Something quieter. The willingness to see clearly and act on what you see, even when it costs you something. I think about that when things get hard now. Not the inheritance, not the house, not any of it. I mean the model of it. The way she moved through her own life with that steady, unsentimental honesty. She didn't pretend my uncle was more present than he was. She didn't rewrite the story to make herself feel better about it. She looked at it plainly and she responded to what was actually there. That's the thing I'm still trying to learn. It's harder than it sounds. It's easy to look at your own life through the version of it you wish were true. It takes real work, and I think it takes years of practice to look at it through the version that actually is. As for my uncle, I don't carry anger about it. That surprised me, honestly. I expected to, but there's something exhausting about being angry at someone for not being capable of more than they're capable of. He made choices that reflected who he was. So did she. So did I. The outcomes followed from that, the way outcomes usually do, not through luck or randomness, but through the slow accumulation of who you actually are over time. What I know is this: I showed up. For years, in the unglamorous, ordinary, daily sense of showing up, driving to appointments, sitting with the hard nights, staying when it would have been easier to go. I didn't do it for the house. I did it because she was worth it, because she had shown me, by example, what it looked like to be worth something to someone. She taught me that the life you build is not made of grand gestures. It's made of the small choices, repeated. Who you call, who you sit with, who you stay for. I'm still learning how to be that person. I think I'll be learning for the rest of my life. But I know where I learned to try.